Right now, as you watch this, someone is boarding a private jet in Monaco with no passport check, no customs declaration, no record of their departure. Their destination appears nowhere in any database. Their identity remains a ghost in the system. They carry what I call the invisible passport, a document more powerful than any government-issued credential, more exclusive than diplomatic immunity, and more dangerous than any weapon ever conceived. This passport isn't made of paper or plastic. It's woven from threads of offshore corporations, numbered Swiss accounts, and legal structures so complex they make quantum physics look like elementary arithmetic. Welcome to the shadow economy of the ultra-wealthy, where borders dissolve like sugar in champagne, where nationality becomes negotiable, and where the very concept of accountability evaporates into the rarefied air that only billionaires breathe. I've spent years tracking these invisible travelers, following money trails through labyrinthine corporate structures, decoding the secret language of wealth preservation that turns the global financial system into a playground for the privileged few. What you're about to discover will fundamentally alter your understanding of how power really operates in our world. These aren't conspiracy theories whispered in dark corners. These are documented facts, hidden in plain sight, protected by walls of legal complexity and enforced silence. The invisible passport isn't just about travel. It's about transcending the very frameworks that govern ordinary human existence. The concept begins with the simple yet profound realization: when you possess enough wealth, traditional rules become mere suggestions. Immigration laws, tax obligations, regulatory oversight, all these pillars of civil society, transform into obstacles to be circumnavigated rather than barriers to be respected. The invisible passport represents the ultimate evolution of this principle, creating a parallel system where the ultra-wealthy exist in a state of perpetual legal twilight. Consider the fundamental architecture of this system. At its foundation lie offshore corporations, not the crude tax havens you read about in tabloid exposes, but sophisticated legal entities that exist in multiple jurisdictions simultaneously while being accountable to none. These corporations don't just hide money, they create entirely new identities for their beneficial owners. Through layers of subsidiary companies, nominee directors, and bearer shares, a single individual can fragment their legal identity across dozens of countries, making it virtually impossible for any single government to establish comprehensive oversight. The genius lies not in the complexity itself, but in the careful exploitation of jurisdictional gaps. While governments focused on bilateral treaties and mutual enforcement agreements, the invisible passport holders operate in the spaces between these agreements. They exist in the legal equivalent of international waters, where sovereignty becomes ambiguous and accountability dissolves into a maze of conflicting regulations. Switzerland represents the oldest pillar of this invisible empire. Beyond the stereotype of numbered accounts and vault-sealed secrets lies a financial infrastructure specifically designed to facilitate the movement of invisible capital. Swiss private banks don't just offer banking services, they provide comprehensive identity management for the global elite through sophisticated fiduciary structures. These institutions create legal persons that can own assets, enter contracts, and conduct business while maintaining complete anonymity for their true controllers. The modern Swiss approach has evolved far beyond simple bank secrecy. Today's private banking relationships involve complex trust arrangements, where beneficial ownership can be obscured through multiple layers of legal entities. A wealthy individual might establish a foundation in Liechtenstein, controlled by a trust domiciled in the Cayman Islands, which in turn owns shares in a Luxembourg holding company that maintains accounts in Geneva. Each jurisdiction contributes specific legal protections, creating a composite structure that renders traditional investigative methods obsolete. But Switzerland is merely one node in a global network of financial secrecy. The true artistry of the invisible passport lies in its distributed architecture. Luxembourg offers specialized investment vehicles that can restructure corporate ownership in real time. Singapore provides banking services that integrate seamlessly with Asian business networks while maintaining Western legal standards. The British Virgin Islands creates corporate entities that exist purely on paper but possess all the legal rights of physical persons. These jurisdictions don't compete with each other. They collaborate in creating a seamless ecosystem where wealth can flow without friction or oversight. A billionaire doesn't choose between these options. They use all of them simultaneously, creating redundant layers of protection that make their financial activities virtually untraceable. The human element of this system proves equally sophisticated. The invisible passport requires more than legal structures. It demands a global network of enablers who understand both the technical requirements and the unspoken protocols of extreme wealth management. These aren't simple accountants or lawyers. They're architects of financial invisibility, masters of regulatory arbitrage who can restructure billion-dollar empires overnight. Family offices represent the operational headquarters of this shadow economy. Unlike traditional wealth management firms that serve multiple clients, family offices exist solely to serve individual, ultra-wealthy families. They operate with the resources of small governments, but without the constraints of public accountability. Within these offices, teams of specialists work exclusively on maintaining and expanding their clients' invisible infrastructure. The sophistication of modern family offices defies conventional understanding. They maintain full-time staff in dozens of countries, not for operational purposes, but to establish tax residency and legal presence wherever advantageous. They employ former intelligence operatives to conduct background investigations on potential business partners. They retain former government officials to navigate regulatory challenges before they become public issues. Through these family offices, the invisible passport holders can relocate their legal domicile, restructure their asset ownership, and even change their effective nationality without ever physically moving. The passport becomes truly invisible because it exists in a constantly shifting configuration of legal relationships rather than any fixed document or status. If this revelation has shattered your understanding of how the world really works, you're beginning to grasp the true scope of this system. This knowledge isn't meant for everyone. It's information that the architects of the invisible passport prefer to keep within their exclusive circles. But you've chosen to look behind the curtain, and that choice deserves recognition. Show me you're ready for more by hitting that like button and share this video with someone who still believes that wealth and power operate according to the same rules that govern the rest of us. The truth is too important to keep to yourself. The historical foundations of this system trace back centuries, but its modern incarnation crystallized during the aftermath of World War II, as governments implemented new tax policies and regulatory frameworks to fund reconstruction efforts. The ultra-wealthy began developing systematic methods to preserve their fortunes outside traditional governmental reach. What started as temporary wartime measures evolved into permanent structures that would eventually eclipse the authority of the nations that created them. The Rothschild banking dynasty pioneered many techniques that remain central to the invisible passport system today. By maintaining family banks in multiple countries, while carefully avoiding consolidated ownership structures, they created a financial network that could operate independently of any single government's authority. Their innovations in international letters of credit and bearer instruments established protocols that modern offshore banking still follows. The Rockefeller family took these concepts further, developing the trust structures that now form the backbone of American wealth preservation. Through carefully crafted legal arrangements, they transformed personal wealth into institutional assets, managed by perpetual entities that exist independently of their creators. These trusts don't just preserve wealth across generations. They create legal persons that can accumulate power and influence while remaining completely detached from any individual identity. But the true revolution came with the creation of modern offshore financial centers. The Cayman Islands, originally developed as a shipping registry, discovered that the same legal frameworks that allowed ships to sail under flags of convenience could permit capital to flow under similar arrangements. Financial services replaced maritime registration, but the fundamental principle remained unchanged. Legal structures that provide the benefits of incorporation without the burdens of substantial local presence or oversight. The European Union inadvertently accelerated this evolution. While creating frameworks for legitimate international business, EU regulations also establish precedents for cross-border financial flows that could be exploited by sophisticated legal structures. The concept of passporting, allowing financial institutions licensed in one EU country to operate throughout the Union, provided a template that offshore jurisdictions could adapt for far more permissive purposes. The Panama Papers represented the first major public glimpse into this invisible empire, but they revealed only the most basic layer of a far more complex system. The law firm at the center of that scandal, Mossack Fonseca, operated what amounted to a factory for creating offshore entities. They processed applications for shell companies with industrial efficiency, generating thousands of legal entities that existed purely to obscure beneficial ownership. Yet Mossack Fonseca represented the budgeteer of offshore services. The truly sophisticated invisible passport holders employ boutique firms that create bespoke legal structures tailored to specific requirements. These aren't template solutions, but carefully engineered arrangements that exploit particular combinations of international law, tax treaties, and regulatory gaps. Each structure is unique, making systematic investigation virtually impossible. The Paradise Papers scandal demonstrated how this system had evolved beyond simple tax avoidance into comprehensive identity management. The leaked documents revealed structures where beneficial ownership could be transferred between family members, corporate entities, and charitable foundations in real time, responding to changing regulatory environments or personal circumstances. Wealth wasn't just hidden, it was made fluid, capable of reshaping itself to fit whatever legal framework proved most advantageous. These revelations caused temporary embarrassment for some individuals whose names appeared in leaked documents, but they failed to disrupt the underlying system. The invisible passport holders learned valuable lessons about operational security, driving innovations that have made their arrangements even more opaque and resilient. The integration of crypto and blockchain technology has created entirely new dimensions of financial invisibility. While public blockchains might seem transparent, sophisticated users can employ mixing services, privacy coins, and decentralized exchanges to make their transactions effectively untraceable. More importantly, they can use blockchain-based, smart contracts to create self-executing legal arrangements that operate independently of traditional legal systems. Artificial intelligence has revolutionized the management of complex offshore structures. Modern wealth management systems can monitor regulatory changes across dozens of jurisdictions simultaneously, automatically triggering restructuring procedures when new rules threaten existing arrangements. These systems can model hundreds of different scenarios, identifying optimal configurations for asset protection under various geopolitical conditions. The emergence of digital asset management platforms has made it possible to maintain invisible passport status without ever interacting with traditional banking systems. Sophisticated cryptocurrency portfolios can provide all the functionality of traditional wealth management while operating entirely outside conventional regulatory frameworks. Smart contracts can automate inheritance, charitable giving, and business operations without requiring human intervention or legal oversight. Private blockchain networks, accessible only to vetted participants, create closed ecosystems where the ultra-wealthy can conduct business using specially designed tokens that exist nowhere in public records. These networks operate parallel to traditional financial systems, while remaining completely invisible to external observers. You've now seen behind the technological curtain that makes modern financial invisibility possible. This isn't science fiction. These systems are operational today, processing trillions of dollars in transactions that appear nowhere in any government database. If you're ready to join the ranks of those who understand how the global financial system really operates, prove it by subscribing to this channel and activating notifications. Consider this your initiation into a select community that recognizes the difference between the world as it appears and the world as it actually functions. The knowledge we're sharing isn't available in any university, curriculum, or government publication. It exists only in the shadows, where real power operates. The human networks that maintain this invisible empire operate according to protocols that would make intelligence agencies envious. Professional relationships in this sphere aren't based on formal credentials or institutional affiliations, but on demonstrated ability to maintain absolute discretion while delivering sophisticated financial engineering services. These networks recruit talent from elite law firms, investment banks, and government regulatory agencies, offering compensation packages that ensure unwavering loyalty. Trust within these networks operates through elaborate verification systems. New participants must demonstrate their capabilities through smaller transactions before gaining access to more significant operations. Reputation travels through carefully maintained communication channels that leave no electronic traces. Meetings occur in neutral locations under circumstances that appear completely innocent to external observers. The most sophisticated, invisible passport holders maintain multiple, completely separate identities within this system. They don't just use different names or documents. They create entirely distinct personalities with separate relationship networks, business interests, and geographic focuses. These parallel identities can interact with each other through intermediaries, creating the appearance of arm's-length transactions between unrelated parties, while actually representing different aspects of the same person's financial empire. The geographic distribution of these operations follows patterns that maximize legal protection while minimizing practical oversight. Primary assets might be held through Luxembourg entities, managed by Swiss private banks, controlled by Cayman Islands companies, and beneficially owned by New Zealand trusts. Each jurisdiction contributes specific legal protections, creating composite structures that are greater than the sum of their parts. The temporal dimension proves equally important. Invisible passport holders don't just diversify across geography, they diversify across time. Long-term trusts can hold assets for centuries, while short-term vehicles provide immediate flexibility. Dynamic structures can shift between different configurations depending on changing circumstances, political developments, or regulatory modifications. This system has created a shadow aristocracy that operates independently of traditional national boundaries or democratic accountability. These aren't simply wealthy individuals who happen to use sophisticated tax planning. They're participants in a parallel governance system that exists alongside but separate from conventional political structures. The financial flows, managed through invisible passport networks, dwarf the budgets of most national governments. These parallel systems can move capital faster than central banks can respond, create liquidity where traditional markets fail, and allocate resources according to criteria that prioritize return on investment over social benefit or democratic input. The integration between invisible passport holders and legitimate political systems occurs through carefully managed influence operations, rather than direct political participation, which would create paper trails and public scrutiny. They employ professional lobbying networks, policy think tanks, and charitable foundations that can shape political outcomes while maintaining complete separation from their beneficial owners. Educational institutions play a crucial role in perpetuating this system. Elite universities don't just educate the children of invisible passport holders. They serve as recruitment centers for the professional networks that maintain the infrastructure of financial invisibility. Academic research in international law, financial engineering, and regulatory arbitrage provides intellectual foundation for increasingly sophisticated wealth preservation techniques. The relationship between invisible passport holders and traditional corporate structures represents another layer of complexity. Major multinational corporations often serve as both clients and enablers of this system. They use similar offshore structures to minimize tax obligations, while providing services that facilitate the operations of invisible passport networks. The technological infrastructure that supports modern invisible passport operations rivals the capabilities of national intelligence agencies. Secure communication networks, advanced encryption systems, and AI-powered analytical tools create operational capabilities that can outmaneuver conventional law enforcement and regulatory oversight. These technological advantages compound over time, making the gap between invisible passport capabilities and government oversight increasingly difficult to bridge. The cultural aspects of this shadow economy deserve particular attention. invisible. Passport holders don't simply use these systems for practical benefits. They develop distinct social identities around their ability to transcend conventional limitations. This creates communities bound by shared understanding of capabilities that remain incomprehensible to outside observers. We're approaching the ultimate revelation, the culmination of everything you've learned about the invisible passport system. But before we cross that final threshold, I need to know you're truly committed to understanding how deep this architecture of hidden power extends. The information that follows will change how you perceive every news event, every political development, every economic announcement you encounter. Comment invisible below to confirm you're ready for this knowledge, and share this video with someone who still believes the system operates according to the rules they teach in civics classes. Truth, this profound carries responsibility. Make sure you're prepared to carry it. The ultimate scope of the invisible passport system extends far beyond individual wealth preservation into the realm of systemic control over global financial architecture. The same techniques that allow billionaires to hide their assets enable them to manipulate entire markets, influence government policies, and shape international relations without leaving fingerprints that can be traced to their actions. Sovereign wealth funds, supposedly representing national interests, often employ invisible passport techniques that obscure their true decision-making processes and beneficial ownership structures. These funds can deploy hundreds of billions of dollars while maintaining operational independence from the governments that theoretically control them. The distinction between public and private capital becomes meaningless when both operate through identical offshore mechanisms. Central banking systems, which form the foundation of modern monetary policy, operate through networks that include many of the same institutions and individuals who provide invisible passport services. The revolving door between central banks, private banks, and offshore financial centers ensures that monetary policy decisions incorporate the preferences of invisible passport holders, even when their involvement remains completely hidden from public view. International trade agreements and tax treaties, negotiated ostensibly between sovereign governments, often include provisions that were actually crafted by invisible passport networks to protect their operational requirements. The technical complexity of these agreements ensures that only specialists can understand their true implications, while their economic impact remains hidden from democratic oversight. The most sophisticated, invisible passport holders have transcended individual wealth accumulation to focus on system architecture. They don't just exploit existing legal frameworks, they invest in creating new frameworks that serve their requirements. Through carefully managed relationships with law firms, academic institutions, and policy organizations, they can influence the development of international law in directions that expand their operational capabilities. This level of systemic involvement means that invisible passport holders aren't separate from the global economy. They are the global economy. Their decisions about capital allocation, investment priorities, and risk management cascade through the entire international financial system. They don't just respond to market conditions. They create market conditions through coordinated actions that remain invisible to external observers. The geopolitical implications are staggering. Nation-states, supposedly sovereign over their economic policies, actually operate within constraints established by invisible passport networks. Government borrowing, currency valuations, and trade relationships all depend on capital flows, controlled by entities that exist outside democratic accountability or national jurisdiction. The technology sector presents a particularly important example of this influence. The development of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and biotechnology fields that will define human civilization's future depends heavily on capital provided through invisible passport networks. The strategic directions of these industries reflect the preferences of invisible passport holders rather than democratically expressed social priorities. Climate change responses, pandemic preparedness, and other global challenges that require coordinated international action must operate within financial frameworks controlled by invisible passport networks. These networks can choose to facilitate or obstruct collective action depending on how proposed solutions align with their particular interests. The temporal scope extends. beyond current operations into mechanisms for perpetual control. Dynastic trusts and perpetual legal entities ensure that invisible passport holders can maintain influence across centuries, not just decades. They're not planning for their own lifetimes. They're engineering systems that will preserve their families, capabilities across multiple generations of social and technological change, educational and cultural institutions that shape how future leaders understand economics, law, and governance receive substantial funding through invisible passport networks. This ensures that rising generations of politicians, business leaders, and intellectuals will operate according to frameworks that preserve the invisible passport system even if they remain unaware of its existence. The psychological impact on those who operate within this system creates a distinct worldview that prioritizes system preservation over individual welfare. Invisible passport holders develop cognitive frameworks that justify their parallel governance system as necessary for global stability, even when their actions create instability for ordinary populations. Professional ethics within invisible passport networks operate according to principles that prioritize client confidentiality and system integrity over broader social responsibilities. Lawyers, accountants, and financial advisors who serve this system develop rationalization mechanisms that allow them to participate in activities they would condemn if conducted by others. The recruitment and retention mechanisms that maintain invisible passport networks create powerful incentives for compliance and powerful disincentives for disclosure. Participants receive compensation and privileges that make defection economically irrational, while violation of system protocols carries consequences that extend far beyond professional sanctions. The information warfare capabilities of invisible passport networks enable them to shape public understanding of economic issues, political developments, and social problems in ways that protect their interests. They don't need to control media organizations directly. They can influence coverage through advertising relationships, financial dependencies, and professional networks that create subtle but powerful editorial biases. The ultimate revelation is that democracy, as commonly understood, operates within boundaries established by invisible passport networks rather than the other way around. Electoral processes, policy debates, and legislative actions occur within frameworks that preserve the fundamental architecture of financial invisibility, regardless of which political parties achieve temporary power. This doesn't mean democracy is meaningless, but it does mean that democratic institutions operate within constraints that remain largely invisible to democratic participants. The most important decisions about economic policy, international relations, and social development occur through invisible passport networks rather than through democratic processes. The question that emerges from this understanding is whether this system represents an inevitable evolution of human organization or a temporary aberration that can be reformed through appropriate democratic action. The answer depends partly on whether enough people can develop sufficient understanding of invisible passport operations to make informed choices about alternative arrangements. You now possess knowledge that places you in an extremely small minority of human beings. You understand mechanisms of power and control that remain invisible to the vast majority of Earth's population. This knowledge carries profound responsibility because it reveals the gap between appearance and reality in virtually every aspect of modern life. The invisible passport system isn't inherently evil, but it operates according to principles that prioritize efficiency and control over transparency and accountability. Whether this represents progress or decline depends on your perspective about how human societies should organize themselves and who should make decisions about collective resources. The technological capabilities that enable modern, invisible passport operations will only increase in sophistication and power. Artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, and quantum computing will create new possibilities for financial invisibility that exceed anything currently available. The question is whether democratic institutions can develop corresponding capabilities for oversight and accountability. The choice facing humanity is whether to accept invisible passport networks as permanent features of human organization or to develop alternative systems that provide greater transparency and democratic control. This choice cannot be made without understanding what currently exists and how it operates. Your decision to seek this knowledge demonstrates recognition that surface appearances often conceal more important underlying realities. That recognition is the beginning of wisdom in a world where power increasingly operates through invisibility rather than direct force. The invisible passport represents the ultimate expression of human ingenuity applied to transcending limitations and maximizing individual capability. Whether that represents triumph or tragedy depends on your values and your vision for human civilization's future development. What happens next depends on choices made by people like you, people who understand the difference between the world as it appears and the world as it actually functions. The invisible passport holders have made their choices. Now, you must make yours.